All right, we have a few more people on now. I wanted to direct everybody to the chat box. So we are answering the question. We're asking everyone to answer the question: what do you need to feel safe in this voting cycle? And also, or what do you feel is needed for us to feel like our democracy is protected during this time? So as we're filling that out in the chat box, we're going to go ahead and tee up this program that we have here. A bunch of brilliant folks are going to walk you all through how to circumvent voter intimidation in this 2020 cycle and beyond. And we will be on in a few minutes. So we're just going to go ahead and allow folks a few more minutes to participate in the chat. All right, I'm going to read off a few of these, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up the program. So we have, in order to feel protected, some people say we need lots of good people to step up and speak out. Everyone needs to vote. I mean, everyone. So we have physical protective gear, protection from harassment by Republican poll volunteers, poll monitors, assurance that people who are entitled to vote are able to vote. Poll monitors might help in this capacity. Sounds great. Keep it going. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and open up the program by again saying thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. I am J. Anthony Holbert. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives with Forward Justice, as well as the Managing Director of the Protect Our Vote campaign. As I said before, we have an awesome program lined up for you all as community. A bunch of brilliant minds on this call that I'm going to be turning this program over to. But just wanted to say one more time, thank you so much. Continue to send your answers to the questions in the chat box while I turn this over to Marcus Bass of North Carolina Black Alliance. And he's going to go ahead and set the groundwork for this program and get us in the spirit that we need to be in. Thank you. All right, so we're going to wait on one more minute for Marcus, but I'm going to read out some more of these that we've gotten. We need to prepare for intimidation and misinterpretation being promoted to create doubt in voters about voter integrity. And now we have Marcus here again, North Carolina Black Alliance. I'll go ahead and turn it over for you.
Thank you, Jay Anthony, and I'm excited to be here. I think we're in a moment where most of our groups that have been aligned since even before 2016 know what's at stake in this election cycle. There's so many different elements that are going to meet voters at the poll. The first thing that we know they'll have to face is the threat of COVID-19. The pandemic is going into now this colder season where winter is going to be affecting individuals that are already critically impaired in many different ways. And I think for us, the North Carolina Black Alliance, we've amassed several different programs to help us figure out how to provide service and aid for residents even before this moment. And I think whenever the opportunity came to partner with Forward Justice, NAACP, with the groups that traditionally do this work like the March in North Carolina, the imperative for a Protect Our Vote coalition and necessity for a Black organization along with the other social justice organizations being in this space was important. And so I definitely bring everyone greetings on behalf of the North Carolina Black Alliance. We're chaired by Senator Valerie Foushee. We are an organization that is committed to working with elected officials and grassroots community leaders. And in this moment, as we prepare for protection at the polls, just want to provide for you a quick snapshot in what we see in regards to what our leaders are thinking. From a state legislative level to the Board of Elections to a county commission level, our leaders have been asking questions in the different various elected official space around what they can do. And I think as we get into this serious moment, there are folks that are really remembering the different elements that has gotten us to this moment. We've released statements on the death of, or the murder of, George Floyd. We saw the loss of Andrea Harris, who was a stalwart in all of our organizations. And in this moment, criminal justice reform has been a key issue even since we got to the polls or to this election cycle. And now in this moment, the racial element that is going to try to subvert us or to subvert our efforts to suppress our vote is not new, but it is intensified in this moment. And so there is a lot at stake. There's a few slides I want to share, Jay Anthony, just to let folks know how we bring it all together and get to the purpose of providing PPE. But these are some of the short and long-term issues that we heard from residents when we did our first line of calls across the state, working with county leaders and elected officials to figure out exactly what we needed to do. The interesting thing is when we talk about sustainability for homeless communities, stabilization of education, legislative advocacy, these are not pandemic issues. These are issues that have we've had to deal with even before COVID-19. And we want to make sure that folks remember not just what is meeting voters in regards to the threats, but in the opportunities in the election cycle. I know there's a lot that we can do, and organizations are providing information around steps for absentee voting, around steps for checking your online voter registration, and we're doing that, and we're making sure folks are prepared. Our HBCUs are engaged. I know a lot of folks on the line may have students or family in the HBCU space. One of the things that we were just on the campus of St. Augustine's University today, launching our college student voter site, where we're providing information for all the 12 campuses, not just where to go to vote, but what are the different scenarios in which a college student's vote could be challenged. The Board of Elections has a bunch of different challenges. I'm pretty sure you all very much so know what those are, but we can't let those challenges stop us from making sure that college students are protected and are ready to vote. And so we're amassing that along with the awesome elements of the Protect Our Vote Coalition to make sure whenever college students get to the polls, there'll be an element of safety. Speaking of safety, I want to provide these kind of three elements of explanation around what we'll be dealing with coming into the early vote season. First and foremost, election protection is a mainstay. North Carolina, thanks to Isela and a lot of other folks, mainly Isela, historically have championed protection from any threats to voters being their ballot being cast away. And so when we talk about poll monitoring, poll workers, poll watching, this is language and things that we know and we have done before. But when we talk about COVID-19 and when we talk about racist voter intimidation of Black and brown voters, we're talking about a community defense strategy that must be amassed. And there's groups on the ground that have been coordinated by Protect Our Vote to make sure that in this moment, Forward Justice, NAACP, Democracy North Carolina, Blueprint Partners, this massive array of folks understand that voter safety and election protection need to go hand in hand in this moment. Jay Anthony, I'm going to toss it back to you after I share a few of these slides. I know there are other maps that kind of show the spread of communities of color across North Carolina. I think in typical voter election cycle seasons, we look at the most largest areas of highly concentrated voters of color. This year, when we talk about voter safety and protection, there's a line of sight that needs to be drawn in areas that may not have large populations of Black voters in concentrated in high areas across the county, but in concentrated small pockets. I'm from Sampson County, and I know very well that while Sampson County is a largely white Caucasian county, the city in of itself in certain pockets inside of the county may have elements of voter intimidation. And we have to look at data like never before, and there's going to be folks to talk about data. What I want to get to is this slide right here. Bottom line, 100 counties, we need to make sure that we're creating safety, not just this element of safe sites, because it's deeper than safe sites. It's about protection. It's about access to the ballot. It's about understanding that these groups, the individuals that are on this line right here, the 55 plus that are joining us, plus those that are on live, understand that we have to create a North Star for our folks in this moment. We're in covenant. We've been in covenant. Protect Our Vote groups have been working since the short session of the General Assembly to make sure that there were no last minute threats of legislative intimidation. Now it's up to us in the next 7 weeks to make sure that we amass the elements of safety and protection across the counties in North Carolina that we need to be protecting. And so I hope that that sets the tone, Jay Anthony, and really kind of puts in our mind what we have at stake. We've done this work before. I want to be clear. In the 50s and 60s, the elements that faced individuals that were going to the polls mirror in a lot of ways what we're facing now. And some of you remember what it was like to have to stand in line to take a test or to have to pay a tax. Right now, we just got, thanks to Forward Justice and NAACP, we just got the poll tax removed for individuals that have been released or returning into citizenship in North Carolina. And we must make sure that those residents are protected. Most importantly, the last thing I'll say is we are providing literal protection, PPE, a single-use mask, glove, hand sanitizer, wipes, pen for voters through this website in conjunction with our partners, Disability Rights, Equality North Carolina, and also make sure we remember these important dates, including the fact that after the 9th, you can still take folks to the polls same day, register and vote. Don't forget it. I know a lot of us have done this for a long time, but we will automatically think that things are over in regards to getting folks that are off the registration rolls into the process. For inactive voters, take them to early voting. For individuals that may have questions, take them to early voting. Don't just stop your efforts of registration on the 9th. Be prepared to move folks to the 15th to 31st. And very last thing, and I promise, Jay Anthony, what are the churches going to do? We talked about the colleges. We talked about the opportunity to create safety at these polling sites. The churches have historically done souls to the polls, and NAACP has led that for a number of years. This year, NAACP will continue to lead, even in the midst of COVID-19, caravans on the 18th and the 25th of October, those 2 Sundays of early voting that a lot of counties have. Churches are already used to caravanning. We caravan for communion. We caravan for tithes and offerings. Now, in this moment of COVID-19, we need to caravan to the polls to make sure we are mobilized together and protected. It's not just about the festive aspect. It's about making sure that you're there so the senior residents or the college students in your church or in your faith organization are protected. And what better way, instead of having to take multiple shifts and utilize vans for extreme periods of time, which we will do that, but we're also creating these 2 days where folks know that they can provide and be provided with safety and a sense of an understanding of souls to the polls in the traditional fashion. That's it, Jay Anthony. I hope I stayed within my time frame, and I'm just excited to hear from everyone else and really let folks know that we're working together. A lot of times people are used to banners and brands. This is something that where we're going to have to put that to the side and have one goal to make sure folks make it out and are protected in October and November.
That was good. Thank you so much for that, Marcus. And thank you for setting the context regarding the unique challenges that black and brown voters are going to be facing during this time. I mean, it's more than just feeling physically protected with in regards to COVID, but there are also opportunities for. There are going to be also situations where we want our people to feel that they have the support of this coalition and that there's a body of people at work to make sure that they are safe once they get to the polls. Just another announcement, Alejandro of our team of Forward Justice is going to be posting links as we move forward, as people are presenting their material. But we will also have all those materials available at the end of this call in a resource folder that we will also be sending out after we wrap this. So at this point, I'm going to be shifting gears and turning the mic over to Isela Gutierrez of America Votes, and she's going to talk to us more about digging into the definition of racist voter intimidation, and then talking about how we progress that we've made from 2016 to now, and how we're planning to do the same thing and do this just as much work to provide protection in this cycle.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you and to be, what more important topic could we be speaking about tonight or ever? Just maintaining the soul of our democracy and keeping ourselves and our communities safe. So I'm honored to be here tonight. I work with America Votes, which is a table of C4 organizations working to promote access to the vote. And I've been working on voting rights in North Carolina for the last 7 years. And I'm guessing I have folks I know. Some of you I know. I can't see you. But I'm honored to be here tonight, so many great freedom fighters, and to start this community conversation just with a collective understanding of voter intimidation in this cycle. So I want to start with framing and definitions. I know, we pretty much all know what voter intimidation is, but I just want to start us out by saying, for purposes of this discussion, I'm going to define it as anything that makes someone fear a consequence for voting. So that consequence could be an economic consequence, depending on, you know, who's operating the polls. Does my boss have a different political party than I do? It could be a threat of violence, a fear of violence, or other kind of retribution, but any kind of negative consequence. And obviously, as Marcus said, what we're seeing is not new. Voter intimidation is not new. In 2016 and since 2016, though, we've been seeing it morph and sort of metastasize in some really horrific ways. I think the primary lesson from the 2016 cycle that I and other voting rights advocates that I've spoken to have taken is that basically it's basically the original lesson of all racist voter suppression, which is that the heart of voter intimidation is hate. It is outgrowth of hate. And so, you know, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been around for significant enough time to make significant elections law related to voter intimidation. And a lot of times we talk about voter intimidation only in the confines of sort of established law and practice and some of the other suppressive activities that are sort of more traditional, you know, long lines, limited access to polling places, and all of that is critical. I don't mean to diminish it, but I think now we're really thinking more and more about the possibility of violent racist voter intimidation and just, you know, the kind of aggressive fear-mongering tactics that we have seen since 2016. So that means that our work to recognize voter intimidation in this cycle has to go beyond the traditional voting rights framework and voting law framework. And if we only frame the hatred that we're seeing as a voting problem within the confines of the polling enclosure, then we will miss, or even within the buffer zone exclusively, we're going to miss the full picture of what's happening and how to protect ourselves and our communities. And so, and we know because we all see every day, whether it's in our communities, we see increasingly disturbing behavior just going around, or what we saw in Alamance County, the swastika mode in the lawn in Onslow County recently, some increasing violence toward by private citizens toward Black and brown bodies, then state actors, also the police, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And then of course what happened in Virginia. So we're seeing this gear up, and we know that we have to be ready. So what are we doing? What are voting rights advocates doing to get ready and to prepare and to learn from those lessons of 2016 and beyond? Well, we're working hard to ensure that election officials and other state officials like the AG and like the governor are also clear that we've got to broaden the definitions, that this is the time for proactive understanding of the law and how it allows us to protect voters. And so Forward Justice, North Carolina NAACP, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Democracy NC, Common Cause, and Advanced Carolina sent a powerful letter today to the State Board of Elections, asking them to do a few things. Well, first of all, explaining to them how the law allows for for real attention to this issue and different and broader attention to this issue. And then secondly, asking them to do 4 things. First of all, make a clear statement against racist voter intimidation, which we have not yet seen our state election officials do. To provide scenario-based training for poll workers so that they're clear on what needs to happen, you know, if an incident comes up. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about what we should be looking out for and what might be an incident to be concerned about. Although I'm pretty sure everyone here also knows. We also asked them to appoint a voter intimidation specialist to work exclusively on this issue. Sorry, my dog is growling. She doesn't like voter intimidation either. We know that there's a lot happening in this election cycle. There are a lot of attacks. I mean, from the pandemic, changing everything about how we live our lives, to the you know, typical and always alarming sort of partisan gamesmanship that we tend to see around our election laws in North Carolina, to things like the prosecution of people who've just made mistakes, like people who voted on accident while serving felony sentences in 2016, or non-citizens who might have made a mistake. We're seeing all this amped up, you know, movement around our election system, and we don't want election officials we don't want them to lose the critical thread of protecting us and our communities against racist voter intimidation and all the other election noise. So we want them to appoint 2 people at minimum, 2 people. That's their only job through the rest of this cycle. Then we want them to update their administrative guidance for election officials, both the people at the county boards and the poll workers, about what is and is not acceptable conduct at the polling place. And then also share information with advocacy groups and allow, so that we can be a part of an information sharing network with the goal of keeping ourselves safe, keeping our voters safe, keeping our democracy functional and a safe place to vote. So, we're pushing hard. We're going to keep pushing throughout the voting period. We're going to push every single day till October 15th, and then we're going to push harder for 12-hour days through, the 12 hours of voting essentially that we have during early voting on the weekdays. We're going to push every single day. We're going to sue legally. We're going to push on policy. We're going to do all the things using every tool and every lever at our disposal, from the national to the local to the state, to make sure that all state and local actors understand the importance of taking voter intimidation seriously and what it is we're asking them to do. Okay, and then of course we're going to hear about some really good program opportunities later for people to plug in, so that we do have, people at the polls with cell phones, with PPE. All the things that people said in the comments are the things that are going to keep them safe and help them feel safe in this moment in our democracy. So, what kinds of things should we be looking out for this cycle? What should we really make sure that we call 888 our vote about, that we tell our, like with the NAACP know about? What do we need to elevate in this cycle? Some things that I especially want to be on the lookout for and hear about early on are damage to campaign or other voter related signs. Any vandalism to campaign headquarters of Black, Indigenous, or other people of color candidates, or candidates of choice. We want to hear about that right away. If it's already happened in your community, let us know, because we view that as some signs of early escalation, and we want to draw attention to that and not just dismiss that as oh this is nothing, just teenagers, just silliness. Well, let's just be on extra watch this cycle. Any signs or symbols of white supremacy or militia-related symbolism or activity that you're seeing. Someone mentioned the Klan showing up at the polling place in the comments. Yes, and also the threat landscape is diverse. So I think, we can share some information afterwards, but just keeping an eye out for anything that seems off. Sometimes I have interactions with people and I'm thinking there's something wrong with that person. I go back and look up a symbol, and it in fact is a symbol that I should have been concerned about. So keeping an eye out for those kinds of things, and then letting us know right away. Any vehicles you see driving around a polling place, even driving around, driving around government buildings that are lurking in some kind of threatening way. You see them out there, you don't know what they're doing, but you keep seeing them. They're driving around, maybe it's not unclear what people are doing, because they're yelling and they've got, they're yelling racial slurs and they've got hateful signs, but we want to know about that kind of stuff right away. Any private citizens or law enforcement with guns within a 10-mile radius or so, pretty big, of a polling place. We want to hear about that. Often we think about just the buffer zone and the polling places protected locations, but we've got to expand that. Like Marcus said, we need to be thinking about community defense, as I think Serena is going to be speaking to later. Because again, voter intimidation is not some magical thing that's going to happen at the polls, right? It's an outgrowth of the hate we're seeing every day in our communities. And then lastly, I'll say any discrimination by poll workers. And this is sort of fits in the more traditional line of voter intimidation and suppression. But there is, but we're seeing the GOP and others actively recruit we're seeing recruitment of more how do I put this? We're seeing a lot of recruitment from right-leaning groups into the traditional partisan programming, like like the Voter Integrity Project recruiting Republican partisan poll observers, for example. So it's like a little weird intersection of like voter intimidators and the normal operations of polling places. And we just want to make sure that, so what might that look like? Asking people for IDs, asking only Black voters for IDs, asking only Latinx voters to spell their names, refusing to offer provisional ballots when requested, especially out of precinct provisionals, and doing it in a way that's clearly racially discriminatory. So those are just some things that I want you to keep your eye out for, and to report as soon as you see them. In terms of, guns are not prohibited from polling places. As I noticed someone put that in the chat. And I think it's a good idea for us to keep an eye out for them. So I'm gonna put those two things out there as living in the same plane. And so I just want to make super clear in naming those out, that voting rights advocates, even if they don't seem like that's related to voting, because you're not seeing this activity right by your polling place or voting hasn't started yet, we're now seeing it as a full picture, right? And we don't want to be surprised by the size of the iceberg. We want to understand the early warning signs that folks are seeing. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to say, if at any point in this conversation, in the Q&A, you're thinking, I just want more detail, or I want to be more engaged about what policymakers are doing to keep me safe, I encourage you to reach out to Governor Cooper, Attorney General Stein, and the State Board of Elections and let them know. Ask them, what are you doing to protect Black voters? What are you doing to take a stand on racist voter intimidation? Because we will be what keeps us safe, but we need everybody to work on this too. So I will stop here and take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Isela. I do want to pull out one question that I saw during your presentation, and that was from a member of the community who's asking, is there an existing list of militia/white supremacist symbols to keep an eye out for, including NC-specific groups?
I will get a list to folks that we can send out afterwards, some images, and I don't know that it's NC specific, but I'll get some resources to send out. It's a really great question.
And then we had somebody else ask to repeat what you said about guns at the polling place. So the first, one caveat I probably should have given at the beginning or whatever. It's just like we all know, we've been here before. North Carolina elections law and these even numbered cycles is going to change. So what I'm going to tell you now is the answer now, and we'll see how it evolves in light of just all the evolving threats. But the rule, as I understand it right now, is that North Carolina is an open carry state, right? So if you have a concealed carry permit, you just have a concealed carry permit. But if someone comes into a polling place open carrying a gun, it's the rules of that particular polling place that govern whether or not a voter can have that weapon. So if the polling place is a school or a church where guns are not allowed, then guns are not allowed in that polling place. But if it's a location that has no clear prohibition on weapons, then there is no prohibition on weapons. So that is what I understand to be the rule. And I think if any of us know of polling places where we know the rule is no guns, but it may not be posted formally anywhere, this would be a great time for those locations to get signs up that clearly say that no guns are allowed. Thank you for that. There are other questions in the chat, but I think a lot of these we're getting some repeats. So I know those are going to be answered either at the end of this program or in the materials that we send out. So please know that we are paying attention to the questions that are being sent in. We just want to make sure that we are able to give you tangible resources post this call. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Isela, for really helping us understand what it is that this coalition is defining as voter intimidation, because I think that it gets a little more broad than some may think when it comes to like that issue. So now we've had the context conversation of how we are experiencing, just say, America in this voting cycle. We've also talked to Isela, who's talked about this collective definition, and now we're going to move into answering some of the questions on what exactly we can do once we do witness those instances of voter intimidation. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Sailor Jones of Democracy North Carolina for his portion called "What Keeps Us Safe."
Thank you, Jay Anthony. I really appreciate the time. My name is Sailor Jones. I work for an organization called Democracy North Carolina that keeps coming up in this, and I know a lot of you are aware of the work of Democracy North Carolina. I am so proud to have worked side by side with Isela Gutierrez and Marcus Bass for the past 5 years on a lot of this work. And I'm so grateful for Forward Justice for hosting us. Jay Anthony, Brittany, Kathleen, Demola's behind the scenes somewhere, Alejandro, thank you for having us tonight. This is an incredibly important discussion, especially in this moment when it feels like nothing can keep us safe in 2020. Talking a little bit about what we do have in terms of a dragnet. Thankful for Marilyn Hartman for responding to Jay Anthony's question earlier and saying, what will keep us safe in this cycle is lots of good people to step up and speak out. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what people are doing to step up and speak out in this election cycle, in addition to what Isela said. And I'm so grateful for her words, and for Marcus for pointing out many regions of the state, many parts of the state that most need that assistance. Marcus is from Sampson County. I'm from the great county of Warren, up in the northeastern part of the state. I'm especially worried about my county in this election cycle, with so many of my friends, family, and community being the targets of so much voter intimidation year after year. So we will work together on this. So what are our plans to keep you safe? I'm just going to talk very briefly. Excited to turn it over to Serena Sebring, our partner and my longtime friend with Blueprint North Carolina. But I just want to give you an overview of some of the things that Democracy North Carolina is working on in this election cycle. And anything you see in these slides will be at demnc.co/takeaction. I know Alejandro will be busily putting links in the chat, but just know everything I talk about is there. It's your one-stop shop for a lot of ways to take action in this election cycle. So I want to talk first and foremost about our plans for the hotline. And when I say the hotline, I think you may know already what I mean is 888-R-VOTE. It is our voter hotline at Democracy North Carolina, along with state and national partners. And it's one of the most important voter education and this year protection tools that we have in North Carolina. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You will see, in addition to the traditional yellow t-shirts at polling places, you will see a lot of the signs that you see on this slide, 888-R-VOTE, in people's yards, at churches, at community groups, at public spaces. This year, we really wanted to take the hotline on the road, knowing that people are sheltering at home. Oftentimes they're walking around their community and they are thinking about voting and thinking about politics, and we wanted to give them the opportunity to ask questions and report any trouble that they see. So our voter hotline is going statewide. We will have these signs at all 448 early voting locations. We will pivot to try to reach the over 3,000 election day polling sites so that voters entering and exiting in-person voting or dropping off an absentee ballot at an early voting site or county board of elections office will have the opportunity to call in if they have questions too. This voter hotline, I don't have to tell you, has been like insurance for many voters in the state, something we don't think about until we need it, and something we are so grateful to have when problems arise. So I'm grateful to work with a great team of people who are working on the hotline this year. It's operated by Democracy North Carolina. It's available year round, especially during business hours, but we increased the staffing and the hours leading up to and concurrently with early voting and election day for obvious reasons, because as Isela said, it is all the way live during that period in terms of taking questions and it's a 12-hour job, as she well knows, having answered it year-round for many, many moons. The North Carolina specific hotline is in addition to a national hotline. I won't go too much into that, but you'll see language about 866-R-VOTE. You can trust that too, but 888-R-VOTE is our North Carolina specific hotline. There's also bilingual assistance available only during early voting and election day for Spanish speaking, Arabic speaking, and Asian languages, all of which those hotlines are available for you right now at ncvoter.org, which is probably a website that will be dropped in the chat many times during this presentation. The hotline is already making a tremendous impact for voters like you in the state. I want you to feel confident in that. It's allaying people's fears. It's answering voter questions. It's already documenting voters' problems thanks to the tremendous number of people who are taking advantage of absentee by mail voting. I think we hit over 1 million voters this week who have requested absentee ballots. Mostly 1 million of those voters are calling the hotline right now, and they are asking important questions. According to our Voter Protection Project Manager, Caroline Fry, the hotline is currently receiving between 50 and 200 calls a day. Friends, I don't have to tell you, it's September. It's not even election month, what we call October. It's not election day anymore, it's election month. And so those are normally the amount of calls that we would be receiving at the height of the election. We are receiving them now. As a result, we have over 200 trained volunteers who will be answering voter hotline questions just in the great state of North Kakalaki all the way up to election day. So I want you to feel confident that when you call 888-R-VOTE, that's 888-667-8683, you will get a warm body on the line who is there to help you, not simply with questions, but if you have trouble at the polls. Right now, as you might expect, some of the most frequently asked questions from the hotline relate to absentee voting, which began in North Carolina on September 4th. Ballots were mailed out on September 4th, and miraculously, some people even received them then. So many people have already voted. And people are asking a lot about absentee voting ahead of the beginning of early voting, which starts, I hope everybody knows it, on October 15th. Primarily, these questions are basic questions. They are, can I vote by mail? Of course you can. North Carolina is a no excuses absentee by mail state. Anyone can vote by mail. You just have to be registered. The registration deadline, regular registration deadline, is October 9th. Many people are asking, where is my ballot? Fortunately, this year we have online ballot tracking. You can learn more about that at ncvoter.org, but people are wondering how to request, vote, return, and track their ballot, and you can do that this year. You can even get push to text, push to voicemail, push to email alerts about where your ballot is in the mail stream. The most important question, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the most recent FAQ is who can serve as a witness. Remember, you need one witness to vote by mail in the great state of North Carolina this year. Anyone over 18 virtually can be a witness. And the biggest question is, can my spouse do it? Absolutely. Just roll right over, get them to watch you fill out the ballot, and it's going to be great. Your spouse can indeed do that, including any family member, any person living with you, a neighbor, anyone over 18. The biggest question is if you're in a nursing home or assisted living facility. There are some limitations to who can be a witness. You don't want candidates witnessing your ballot. We don't want undue influence anywhere in the state. So that's an important thing. But those are the biggest questions we're getting. And those questions are going to shift a little as we do in-person voting, and they'll turn into reports, right? Because we'll be going to in-person voting and we'll be seeing a lot of the things that Isela talked about in her presentation in terms of voter problems and voter intimidation. The hotline is also a place where you can report those. And don't be afraid if you don't feel like calling the hotline to report those, but I want to emphasize it's 888-R-VOTE, and that you can call it even now. Operators are standing by. I never got a chance to say that when I was a kid. I really appreciate it today, Jay Anthony. And so who is going to answer the phone and who is going to get you on the phone and reminding you of 888-R-VOTE? Well, it's a person who looks just like this. They're looking a little different this year. These are our vote protectors. They're going to be at the vast majority of counties in the state, deployed at voting sites that have had problems in the past, to be there to connect you with the hotline if you have problems, and to contact the hotline, more importantly, if they see problems. So if anything pops up that Isela talked about, if there's a voter intimidation at the polls, if there are people who are protesting, we saw that this past weekend in Virginia, that some president's supporters wanted to block the polls. That is the moment where these vote protectors are going to call that hotline. Get on the phone with legal experts, get in touch with the County Board of Elections, the State Board of Elections, and attorneys who are waiting to help, and also stamp out those problems and make sure voters have access, safe and secure access to those polls. So look for the signs, look for the yellow t-shirt, look for the mask. This year, in the age of COVID, we are masked up and ready to go. And if I was a smarter communications professional, that would have been our t-shirt, but next year. So why do we do the Vote Protector program? Well, we believe at Democracy NC that everyone who wants to be able to vote should be able to cast a ballot, and this is the way we do it. In a Montel Jordan way, this is how we are going to do this election, where we make sure that everybody gets access so voters do not feel alone, they do not feel confused, and they have access not simply to the answers that they need to cast a ballot, but access to legal experts who will help them if they have been prevented from it. It's not simply about getting access to the polls this year, it's about making sure those votes count. These are the people who will help. But we can't be everywhere, so we have recruited over 1,000. In fact, I'm gonna say we've recruited over 1,500 vote protectors this year. Keep in mind, we had Isela led back in 2016, the largest statewide voter protection program in the country. We expect it could meet that or go beyond that. And that is a feat, friends, in the age of COVID, where so many people want to shelter at home and be safe, that so many people are stepping up to volunteer to be a part of the program this year. For example, during the 2020 primary, a polling place in Bertie County, it's Bertie, it's not Bertie, ran out of ballots, and the vote protector alerted us to that fact. In real time, they were able to contact the hotline, get lawyers on the horn, get them contacting the county and the State Board of Elections to extend the hours of that polling place. So that's an example of how they work. But in the 2016 election, they're not just helping polling sites do what needs to be done, they're helping individuals. In 2016, Isela and the gang helped over 4,000 North Carolinians get connected to voting in the polls. I don't have to tell you that 4,000 people is about half of the people who determined the gubernatorial election in 2016, and about a third of the people who determined the electoral votes that went to a president in 2008. So that's an important number of votes. They'll decide statewide races as well and local races, so very important. And the stories collected from the vote protectors of problems at the polls, especially as it related to voter ID back in 2016, which is not required to vote in 2020. They helped overturn the monster voting law in 2016 and make sure that we didn't have to have voter ID then, and will probably help us make sure we don't have to have voter ID in the future. Thoughts and prayers. And the election team infrastructure is North Carolina lawyers and experts assisting. It's not just me, it's not a lay person, it is the experts who are helping. So feel safe when you call that hotline, you have someone knowledgeable at the other end of the line there to help. I want to talk a little bit about who can be a vote protector, because of course I'm going to make that hard pitch at the end of this, that you do this, at least 16 years old, have transportation to and from that assigned polling place, can complete a training, because things are a little bit different this year. So we want to make sure you have what you need, commit to being nonpartisan, helping all voters as they go into the polls, and that you're able to fill an assignment and monitor either the first day of early voting, our spooky season last day of early voting on October 31st, or on election day. So these are the 3 days we will be at the polls, and we would love to have you there with us. There are traditional and roving poll monitors this year. We know a lot of poll monitors do not want to have that hand-to-hand, voice-to-voice contact with voters. We understand that, but you can still help from the safety of your car, roving around these polling places and letting us know if you see incidences of voter intimidation, if you see problems, if you see police presence that's intimidating voters, if you see people picketing or rallying in a way that is intimidating to voters, you too can help by calling the hotline. So roving between polling places in your county can help, even if you're not there on the ground, to help one-to-one. And you can see that our days of action on the 15th and the 31st and on election day are doing things like documenting voter intimidation and voter confusion, but they're also documenting the more traditional versions of voter suppression in the state, which look a lot like long lines, which look a lot like people not being able to use curbside voting if they can't make it to the voting room, which look a lot like arriving and parking issues that prevent people from accessing the voting room for in-person voting. So this is what it may look like on election day, right? We'll have some lines at the polls. There's increased interest this year. People will be masked up, hopefully. These are the types of things that we see. If you have long wait times, if you've been denied curbside voting, we want to be there for you at 888-R-VOTE. So we encourage you, if you have any problems at the polls, and we will see this, we want you to call the hotline and make sure others do the same. It wasn't a poll monitor that opened the Bertie County polling site longer. It was a person who saw the number on the line, trusted that they could get help, and decided to take action for their community and made that happen. So anyone can do it, anyone can use it, and help make a difference at your polling place and protect voters. So I just want to say briefly, there are some COVID trainings. All of our trainings are virtual. There is a roving option, and if you're concerned, we will be encouraging social distancing. We'll be masked up. We'll actually have 888-R-VOTE on our masks, so they'll be super incredible this year. And we'll be monitoring for poll workers, CDC guideline adherence, and social distancing at the polling places as well, so we can make sure even when you go inside the voting room that you are safer at the polls. So you can sign up today for a training, learn more about the Vote Protector program at demnc.co/Vote Protector. And last but certainly not least, I would like to make a pitch for something that's incredibly important: managing expectations this year. We know there are a lot of people whose votes will be challenged this year. There will be a lot of voter intimidation. But all eyes for me are on November 13th for the day of canvass. A lot of people don't know what that is, and it normally doesn't make a huge difference in the statewide and federal races that we're following. But really, the day of canvass is going to be super important this year. It's when there's this final tabulation and recordation of absentee ballots and a look-see at the provisional ballots as well. And I really want to make a pitch for you to join us for the day of canvass. It's not just about absentee voting or early voting or election day voting. Again, it's not election day, it's election month, my friends. And it's not just an election, it's a selection. And you get many options to vote this year and many options to help. Day of canvass is one of them. And you will be able to help us on the day of canvass. Again, it should be around November 13th this year. And this is the place where the consideration of absentee ballots, again, I just said over 1 million people have requested them. It's going to be a big deal this year. Sample hand-to-eye paper ballot counts will take place, and provisional ballots will be tabulated. So this is going to be an important day in your county to make sure all voters who voted have their voices heard and their ballots counted. Important this year to sign up and learn more. Again, there will be a training attached, so you don't have to learn all about Canvas from me at demnc.co/Canvas. Last thing I'll say, everything you see here, poll worker recruitment, poll monitor recruitment, inside, outside, day of canvass, actions you can take, like Isela mentioned, to reach out to the State Board of Elections and encourage them to do the right thing in terms of voters. Everything you saw tonight is at demnc.co/takeaction. It's just a small part of what our organizations are doing to keep you safe. And now I have the honor of turning it back over to Jay Anthony and to Serena Sebring, my young old friend, to talk more about how we're keeping you safe this year. Jay Anthony.
Thank you so much, Saylor. Saylor always has bomb slides. Wonder, like, I really got to start upping my games for mine to look like that. But just to underscore one thing that was said, so we are asking folks to use 888 our vote, not only once we get to the polls and on election day, for early voting on election day, but also if you have questions leading up to October 15th right now, go ahead and start making those phone calls and get that information. And then we're also going to be sending out information that was said regarding the vote protector sign up list after this call. So at this point, we are right at 6 o'clock. So we are halfway through this program. Thank you for the 66 of you who are on with us right now. As we are continuing this path of citing resources, we've heard from DMNC about their ongoing work, vote protecting work that they've been doing the last, at least the last cycle. We are now going to go down a different path and talk about a new program that is being introduced by Serena Sebring of Blueprint, North Carolina. And I'm excited because the title of this section is called Power, Protection, and Encouragement. So I am super excited to hear more about what this plan is going to be. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you now, Serena.
Hey, thanks so much, J. Anthony. And Saley, you can keep calling me young whenever you want to. I like it. I appreciate it. And we could all use a little juice these days. So let's keep each other encouraged. That's what I'm here to talk about. I want to share with you a little bit about Blueprint North Carolina for folks who might not know us yet. And then talk about what our movement is growing in response to some of the needs that you have heard a lot about from my colleagues over the last hour or so. I want to say, first, my name is Serena Sebring. I use she and her pronouns. I'm executive director of Blueprint North Carolina. And sometimes I know how to share my slides in a really smooth way, and sometimes I don't. So we'll see what happens right now. But I'm going to share my screen to tell you a little bit about Blueprint. Okay, not bad. Not bad this time. Not bad. Let's see if I can scroll down to the right page. Oh, see, there's always a thing. There's always a thing. That first blue slide there, hold on. Let me just try and get this right. Thing. Okay, well, the side that's up there that you can kind of see, that says Blueprint. The big pink one here is kind of the important one that I want to talk to you about. So Blueprint North Carolina is an invitation to movement. And we are, in this moment, trying to be the biggest and bravest, most courageous invitation that we can be in a time when I know that we are all facing the kinds of concerns that are showing up in this chat box here. We're wondering, will we be safe at the polls? What will we be facing? What resources do I have? We are doing our very best to really answer that. So Blueprint is a formal partnership of 53 C3 organizations, a web of network allies, and we're working to build independent power for anti-racist and inclusive democracy. We have some specific criteria for what an anti-racist, inclusive democracy might look like. And that includes open, reflective, and responsive governing institutions. We know that structural racism and economic inequalities really shrink and weaken democratic process through laws, through practices, and through culture that has for too long excluded too many of us, Black people, people of color, poor and working class people, women, LGBTQ people, people with disabilities, excluded from access and representation. And so we are working to grow and to sustain an expanding progressive infrastructure capable of shifting hearts and minds, as well as policy. And we know that this takes a broader sort of perspective than sometimes we talk about when we think about a formal democracy. But we know that we cannot have an inclusive democracy without things like clean air and water, without access to affordable housing. We know that an inclusive democracy requires equitable public education, safe communities, and healthcare. And these are really preconditions of full participation in a democracy that can work for all of us. And so Blueprint is here as an invitation to movement, as a scaffold for the builders of a North Carolina in right relationship with its people. And everything I'm going to talk to you about for the rest of our time together really is captured by that last line there. We are looking out into a future that gets more and more bleak, more and more scary, and those things tend to set our minds towards individualism, towards isolation. But we know actually that it's still true that the safest community is an organized community. And so we are working to build relationships and capacity. I want to just lift up, we are moving under two key organizing principles. Those are collective impact and race equity, and the work to protect voters and really to protect people at the polls fits in line with those, and we are moving through the 4 pillars of our work to build a robust civic engagement, to move public dialogue through narrative strategy, to strengthen skills, and to innovate and try some things. So that's what we're trying to do this time. Before I can tell you about the voter protection work we're doing, I want to stop and lift up what that work sits inside of for us. So I mentioned that Blueprint is a formal network of C3 organizations and a coalition. And I learned from some of my mentors that coalitions are those spaces where we stretch, where we grow, and where we're challenged to really meet the needs of moment in relationship with other organizations and formations. And so we leaned into this moment a few months back with a challenge to our partners that has become known as North Carolina for Black Lives. And we just put an ask out to a multiracial formation of progressive organizations across the state, saying, will you, in the time that we have, in this very historic and critical election cycle, will you actually stand on the side of Black lives? And our partners' resounding answer was yes. And I'm glad that they weren't just saying yes to write a statement or put up a yard sign, because what we asked was for more than just a shift in the way that they talked about race in this cycle, but actually a shift in capacity. We asked our partners, will you put your hands to this freedom plow? And will you devote the capacities of your people and the resources of your organization towards divesting from white supremacy and investing in Black lives, Black communities, and Black organizations? And so NC4BL is an effort that really represents that challenge to our partners and an expanding invitation that is now for more than just organizations, but also for individuals to make a commitment to actually find what is our lane in this moment and how can we be part of doing something that is both bigger than ourselves in terms of history and also of consequence to ourselves as human beings who frankly have young people, have children, have nieces, have nephews, have young people that we see on our block every day who are going to look to us in 10 years or in 20 years and say, what did you do in this moment? What did you do? Where was your focus? Where was your heart and where were your hands? And so both the larger framing of North Carolina for Black Lives, as well as the voter protection work that we are rolling out underneath that umbrella are an answer to a question 10 years from now. And so we very much hope that we are moving in ways that not just answer the questions of this electoral cycle, as important as it is. And I know we're all on this call because we care very much about what's going on in this election, this season, this right now. It feels like everything is on the line. And what we know is that that might be the case. And there will be a 2021 when the cameras are gone, when the ads that we're watching on TV are no longer dominated by these parties, and what we do now sets the course for that. So we're also trying to think for the long term. What are the capacities that we need? And as we move under a banner like North Carolina for Black Lives, we have to acknowledge that a movement for Black lives has grown around a call, a very humble call that Black lives matter. If I think about the arc of history and the trajectory that meets us here at this moment, We know that 20, 30 years ago, people were talking about Black power in the street and building, you know, autonomous organizations. And in this moment, we make the very, very humble and yet courageous call to say Black Lives Matter. And we say that in the context of knowing that it is both bigger than police violence, it is bigger than, you know, what happens when people are shot in the street, and it is also as big as the announcement about Breonna Taylor's case yesterday. We know that both things are true, that it has to be about more than just policing, and that in and of itself, this is worthy of our attention. This is worthy of our capacity. That as we call ourselves progressives and as we move under an umbrella like North Carolina for Black Lives, we have to be about the business of safety. No message could be clearer in this moment or in this month or in the rotations of the news cycles that I'm watching than that we need new solutions. That what we have in terms of protection for our communities, for our people, both Black people and non-Black people of color, for working class communities, can simply not rely on the state to create safety and security for our communities. And so part of our efforts to build protection at the polls is to build what is needed for a long-term infrastructure that is more equipped to create safety where we lack it now. And so what that looks like is building out teams. We need teams of people in formation and practice at doing things like de-escalating and even noticing and feeling empowered to say, I am responsible for what happens in my community. And we know that we have great models for that. You know, we know that in the South, we have front porches, and on those front porches, most times, somebody's auntie, somebody's grandma was looking out for us. And we need to come back to that and start looking back to who's on our front porches. And so this is a first step in doing that as well. Our pledge is here, and I share it here because I want to invite everybody who's on this call right now to take it as well. You can find it at nc4bl.com. You can take this pledge. You can encourage your organization to take this pledge. And everybody who joins us, and we hope that's a lot of you, in moving in voter protection in this season is asked to sign on to this pledge. So it grounds our work, and I'll share it with you now. In this moment of global reckoning and uprising, we, progressive organizations and leaders across the state of North Carolina, affirm that all Black lives matter. As a Black-led, multiracial, and multi-issue movement, we are united in commitment to collectively defend, protect, and honor Black lives. We bring the resources available to us, the capacities of our people, and our courage to transform white supremacist cultures, policies, and structures. For Monica Diamond, for Akiel Denkins, for Janisha Fonville, for Marcus Dion Smith, for Jacob Blake, for Keith Lamont Scott, for Nisi Farrell, we commit to invest in Black communities and divest from white supremacy. We know that when we invest in Black communities, we all win, and we will win. For Jonathan Farrell, for David Brooks, for John Neville, for Brandon Webster, for Braden Webster, rather, for Dankiers Franklin, for Trevis Smotherman. Together in 2020, we will work to grow electoral, narrative, financial, and alternative power towards a vision of racial justice, anti-racist, inclusive democracy, and a day when the inherent value of Black lives is unquestioned. For all of our futures, for all of our children, we put our hands to this freedom plow. One way that you can do that with us right now is in joining us in building out power, protection, and encouragement at the polls. You notice it says PPE, right? One of our brilliant folks, Wanda Hunter, I want to shout her out every single time I give this pitch. Noticed, and really, let me just tell you, Wanda Hunter is our resiliency coordinator. She is out here distributing literal PPE to our many partners across the state, who are doing a lot to engage people who will show up at these polls, and equipping them with the actual protective gear that we need leading up to this moment. And we need more than that meeting our people at the polls this time. We are expecting to have to grapple not just with the virus, that is a challenge both to our electoral processes and our ability to stand in what we expect to be very long lines, but also we're expecting a wave of voter suppression that is unlike what we have seen in the previous 40 years. We know that the consent decree, which held Republicans from poll monitoring for 40 years, ends this year. And so we know that the climate, the very busy and active climate outside of our polling places, will have a new layer this year. And so often that new layer is against everything I just talked about in terms of commitment to Black lives. And so we want to meet people with encouragement. And we also want to meet people with protection. So our PPE program is rolling out. We seek to have a program across the state. It's 100 counties, as Marcus opened us up with, 100 counties in this state. And many of them have multiple polling sites, right? And so we can't be everywhere. So we need help. We are recruiting organizations to host safe sites at the polls during early voting and on election day. And one day this is gonna have fancy slides too, but that day is not today. So you're just gonna have to hear me talk about it, and I'll do my best. We just sent out a request for proposals to organizations, and that should have been included or will be included in the materials that come to you after this call. That request for proposals offers funding to organizations to host one of those sites during one day of early voting. And to do so, you will need about 10 people to staff key roles. Those roles include a lead coordinator, a program planner. Why? Because there's program, and it's gonna be fun. I'm gonna tell you about that in a moment. And then safety leads. As I said, I cannot impress upon us enough how important it is that this moment is one when we grow capacity and skill around safety and community defense. So we want to stipend these people. We want a safety lead and a safety team of 6 to 8 people. We're going to send you $5,000 for approved organizations who can line up those roles. We suggest that you pay all of them, and we have some suggestions on how. And what will come with that is extensive training in de-escalation, in program planning for fun, and safety. So I told you about the safety part first. What these are also moving in is a practice that Blueprint has had for several years now, since 2017, of doing parties at the polls. There was a program that we've been part of called Vote Together that has been calling people out to host events at polling sites for some years, and very effectively. Some of the research on their outcomes show that when we provide spaces that feel welcoming, where there's like music, where there might be snacks, where there could be community-based organizations that have activities for kids, that these increase the number of people who feel like this has something to do with me, like I will see someone I know there, and that this matters. So very effective practice. What it does for us this year is give us the opportunity to create a container of safety. So we're not calling them parties this year, and that's some tricky messaging that you might want to think about, because we know that in the news and at the times of COVID, the sound of party is very anxiety producing. I'm not sure if we want to go out of the house. Do we want to go to a party? Maybe not, but if that party is the place where we find everything that sets up the material conditions of our life is on the ballot, we want to find a way to help you get there. And so we will call it a socially distanced gathering. And we will provide protective gear. You know, many of the boards of elections are going to have masks and gloves and hand sanitizer. We're bringing more. We're bringing more, we're giving them out in bags. We'll leave them at the side. You can take some home with you. An abundance of this kind of personal protective equipment and supplies to organizations that want to host one of these safe sites. But wait, there's more. These socially distanced gatherings are actually intended to be places of joy and celebration. And Sailor showed you some really long lines. So what that's gonna look like might be a line dance. We might have some movies showing on projectors. We might have some trivia games via cell phones so that people can stay in the line. We just want you to stay the course, and we're gonna give you whatever you need to get there. This is also an opportunity for us to partner with organizations. If you don't have 10 people, it's cool. Find another organization, see if they got 5. We will partner you, we will train you, we will resource you. And on the other side of that, we feel that we will be more ready to face what we can expect to be some unique challenges at the poll this year. And beyond that, for the great likelihood and potential of a contested election, a very difficult, series of months that we're heading into, what we will have is formations of people who have worked together to create safety before, who know how to de-escalate, and who are more connected to the organizations they came with, and those organizations are more connected to each other. And so we ask you to be a part of trying something big in a big time. And that's power, protection, and encouragement. We want to share it with you. If there are questions about this, we have a whole team eager. They are eager to talk about this and really want to support you in applying for support or applying our model to the work that you are already doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Serena, for that. And do you want to go ahead and drop information into the chat box as to how to be in contact with you for that once you roll out that plan, and for those who want to volunteer? Thank you, Serena, for one of the most important things that I believe you did was remember to anchor us in the fact that though we are all hands-on this election for multiple reasons, like the work that we're doing right now and the structure that we're trying to build is going to carry us beyond this 2020 election. So there are the election seasons, there's the work that happens between the election seasons, and there's also the grounding truth that this anti-Black racism that exists at the polls, it does not operate in a vacuum. It's not racism. It's not something that comes along just during election season, then goes away. So making sure that we are continually thinking about how to also deconstruct those racist systems is super important in all the work that we're doing. So with that being said, we are let's see, we are at 6:18 now. We're closing in toward the end. So I think we talked about different forms of intimidation. We talked about how we plan to protect our voters when it comes to physical health in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. We talked about physical safety and physical health at the polls in regards to harmful activities at the polls by individuals. So now we want to talk about a topic that has not been as highly publicized, and that is a very important population of folks in our community who will be voting, some for the first time, and some are moving back into being voter eligible due to past felony convictions, and then thinking about demystifying the voting process for those who have that story. So now I'm going to turn it over to our very own Brittany Cheatham, who is the communications manager for Forward Justice. And then she's also going to be supported by Kat Robles, who's also a Forward Justice. So go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. It's great to be here with all of you tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something that Isela and Marcus touched on. And so when we think and we talk about voter intimidation, we often forget about this subset of people who have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system, or those who have records and want to vote, right? And this is an issue that disproportionately impacts Black and Brown voters, because although Black voters comprise just 22% of the voting population in North Carolina, we comprise 42% of people who are disenfranchised while on probation or post-release supervision. And when you drill down even more for Black men, although they comprise just 9.2% of the voting age population in North Carolina, they account for over 36% of those disenfranchised, right? And so when you're disenfranchised and the guidelines are unclear, as they are in North Carolina, and you're not sure about your voter eligibility, that uncertainty can be another form of voter intimidation, especially when you're seeing news stories about folks in North Carolina who are having charges pressed against them for voting accidentally and not knowing if they are supposed to vote, right? And so I think this is an important time to uplift this issue and the work that's being done around it. And so at Forward Justice, in partnership with the North Carolina Second Chance Alliance and North Carolina NAACP, we've launched the Unlock Our Vote campaign, which is our effort to expand the we and we the people. And we want to make sure that everyone has access to the ballot so that our democracy is truly inclusive and representative of all people. And so that campaign comprised a litigation component, which are the recent ruling in our court case, Community Success Initiative v. Moore, found that the current felony disenfranchisement law in North Carolina is unconstitutional. And so that ruling restored voting rights to certain North Carolinians with felony convictions, right? And so getting a little bit specific, but not too specific, I'm gonna leave that to Kat. She's one of our amazing staff attorneys. She'll tap in there, right? But the new ruling means that you are eligible to vote in North Carolina if you've completed your probation, parole, or post-release supervision, even if you still owe court costs, fines, fees, and restitution. And that's really important because the current rule as it was a relic, or a modern day, I should say, a modern day poll tax, right? So we are now on a 7-week sprint to provide clarity and guidance so that folks know what the new guidelines are. They know about their voting eligibility. And then we're also doing some community outreach to get folks registered to vote. And so we have a website. I'm going to do a quick screen share with you all. You can get to it by visiting our website, forwardjustice.org. There's a pop-up that'll come. There's a story right on the homepage. We have all the flashing lights and signals pointing you guys to this very important information. And so this has frequently asked questions around voting eligibility with the criminal record as it relates to the new guidelines, important dates, links and resources for everything from your ballot tracking to voter registration lookup to your absentee ballot request portal. If you're interested in the court ruling, you can access that there. You can learn more about the Unlock Our Vote campaign there, as well as learn more about our partners. And this work is so important with everything that's at stake in this election. We really can't afford for people to stay home because they are afraid to vote, even though they may now be eligible to do so. So even though it's something that is not often lifted up, as Jay Anthony said, it is a very real form of voter intimidation for a lot of folks. And so we are pulling out all of the stops around our community outreach to let folks know about the change in law and how it will impact them. And so before I turn it over to Kat, I just want to very quickly plug that we need your help to do this outreach. And so I'm encouraging all of you all to join us this Saturday from noon to 1. We'll be doing a virtual phone banking party on Zoom. Come out and make some calls, send some text messages with us. We really need to make sure that our folks know their rights and that they feel comfortable exercising them. And this will also be in the details that go out in the follow-up email after the event. I just wanted to give that plug. I will turn it over to Kat now to talk a little bit more about what the ruling means and to answer any questions that folks might have.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I think the big message overall is that just because you have a criminal record does not mean you cannot vote in North Carolina. You know, there may be people who are coming from other states where that is the case. So, you know, first and foremost, we want to make sure that people understand that just because you have a criminal record or even maybe are currently on probation does not mean that you cannot vote. First of all, people who are on misdemeanor probation have always been able to vote. That's a question that you get a lot. What happened with the recent ruling is that there was a 3-judge panel that declared that it's unconstitutional for someone's right to vote to be withheld solely because of the fact that they owe fines, fees, or restitution. And so the way that this has sort of been phrased on the state board's website is that you may register and vote if, 1, you're serving an extended term of probation, post-release, or parole, you have outstanding fines, fees, or restitution, and you don't know of another reason that your probation, post-release, or parole was extended. We fully recognize that this can be a little confusing, which is why we have our FAQs. And if those don't answer the question for you, we have also set up an email and a phone number. And I'm hoping we can put those in the chat too, because we totally understand that you may have, some hesitations. You're still not sure after looking at the FAQs. If you are eligible to vote, please email us, call us, and we are here to try to provide clarity for anyone who's not sure. So we just want to make sure that everyone gets out the message that the fact that you have a criminal record in the past, or that you're even currently on probation, parole, or post-release does not mean that you can't vote. Another thing that the court ruling sort of clarified also is that if you've been unconditionally discharged from probation, parole, or post-release, but you still have outstanding fines and fees, maybe they got converted into a civil judgment, you can vote. You got unconditionally discharged, your probation, your parole, or post-release is over, you can vote. So the fact that you might have a civil judgment sitting out there, that shouldn't be keeping you from voting. So thanks so much for having me, and hopefully that gives some clarity. But like I said, feel free to come to our website or email us or call us if you have a client or someone in your community who wants more clarity on whether they specifically are eligible to vote this cycle.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Kat. I just wanted to make sure that, Brittany, did you have anything else in closing for that portion?
No, I think that's it, but thanks, Jay.
All right, thank you so much for all that information. So we're going to be, there are some links that have been dropped in relation to what Brittany and Kat just spoke about. If you look in the chat, there is a phone number where you can look up concerns about felony disenfranchisement. And there's also, so we are going to also be compiling that information into this kind of sort of condensed email that we're sending out with all the links for everything that we've talked about during this phone call, during this call. Really? So now I want to,
if you could, or let me know if we want to answer offline. Someone wants to know, how will the arrest of protesters impact their ability to vote? Let me know if that's something you want to answer.
Right, we can, if you all would like to answer that now, I would leave that to Kat and Brittany to. So just to reiterate the question, they want to know what's going to happen for what impact getting arrested at a protest is going to have on the right to vote or the ability to vote.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be any different than anything else. Obviously, there are a variety of things that people can be arrested for at a protest. So there's no one, concrete answer of whether, for example, it would be a felony or a misdemeanor. It would really just be the same questions as usual. If you were arrested at a protest and then as a result, you're currently on misdemeanor probation, that would mean you can vote. So obviously, it's something that we're cognizant of, the idea that people are sort of being arrested currently, which could affect their ability to vote. Obviously, one thing to keep in mind too is when you look at all these requirements, it's that you actually have been convicted. So it may be the case that, on November 3rd, you have sort of a charge pending. Just to make sure you read the details, it's usually that you have to have actually been convicted. But of course, if this is in real time and you have a question, please email us or call us and we will help you to determine your eligibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And as you can see, some of the questions have been answered in the Q&A portion as well as in the chat. So if your question has not been answered, we are going to take these back to the table, flesh out some of the responses and then get those back also in the follow-up materials. So we are actively looking at all the questions that are coming in. So I appreciate all those who have been sending in questions and concerns in those two avenues. So we are getting ready to come to the close of this event. So I want to just go ahead and send out a round of gratitude first for foremost to everybody who has joined this call, everybody who registered to come join us on this Tuesday evening. I know a lot of you went straight from work to this, and that does not go unnoticed. I definitely appreciate that. Also, a round of applause and gratitude for all of our wonderful panelists who have put together these like beautiful slideshows. These have agreed to come on camera with me, which I know is awkward for me. So I think a lot of people, some more folks are more comfortable, but definitely thank you for the team who was also behind the scenes, who has been running point on the live stream, as well as all the functions that are Zoom related. They are the experts, and I have really appreciated it. One thing I want to close with is we have been plugging a lot of things throughout this phone call. We've been sending out email addresses in the chat, as well as ways to plug in. Though all that information is going to be compiled into the materials that we're sending out. So we want to make sure that if there are volunteer opportunities, we get those to you. If there are people who you want to reach out to who have presented on this phone call and want to find out more about their plans in their respective areas, that information will also be going out. If you've registered for this webinar, then that means you are on a list of, we're on the registration list and on the list to have all this information blasted out to you. So thank you again so much. I want to turn it to the panelists to see if there are any other closing questions or thoughts. Otherwise, is that really?
Anthony, I just wanted to say one thing. We are partnering with Disability Rights. We are partnering with Equality NC to provide mailed PPE kits for voters. I put that link in the chat. I think there are a lot of reasons why we need to prepare for in-person voting, and that's what this call was about. I think to the best of our ability, the number one thing we can do is protect ourselves. We heard from Serena about the PPE that's being provided for volunteers. This is a way to make sure that individuals in community can, by mail, get a kit, single-use pen, glove, mask, hand sanitizer. So definitely excited about that for folks that want that information. That's in the chat too.
Thank you all so much again. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and close, and I would say just go out, go forth, enjoy the rest of your night, be safe, and try to find some joy in this time that we're living in right now. So have a good night, folks.